Hello, everybody. It is our usual Friday live stream. I'm very excited for Game Week 8. Not excited for the incoming international break, though. Absolute nonsense, all that is. But we've got eyes fully locked on the Premier League for this game week. And so, as always, got to introduce the big man himself. Ben, how are you doing today?
Yeah, Mark. Yes, I echo those sentiments. Looking forward to Game Week 8. Didn't have a bad Game Week 7, as it happens. Typically, when you go against the template, when most managers are having a bad week, have the opposite swing. So a decent, I think, 60 plus points I ended up on last week. So yeah, but I am looking forward to the international break. I must admit, definitely a couple of days taking it easy. And of course, next weekend I will miss Premier League football, but yes, it's not all bad. There are still some international games going on and lots of other things behind the scenes working on the website and getting stuff live. So still plenty to do.
Yes, and also, obviously, you talk about last game week in terms of Premier League, but also during this week, Newcastle absolutely battered PSG. Do you want to talk us about that? As a Newcastle fan, that was the first time in, is it 20 years since you had Champions League football over there, at St James's Park. How was that for yourself?
I mean, what a night, wasn't it? Absolutely fantastic. You couldn't have written a better script. Like I say, the first one back on Tyneside in 20 plus years. It all started with, having the drones over St James's Park, and that really whet the appetite for what was, to lie in wait. Let's not fool ourselves. PSG aren't the team that they once were. They're a big name. It's a great fixture to have, as are, AC and Dortmund. But none of those teams are, maybe they've slipped just a little below those high levels of maybe, the recent times. So, look, it's fantastic. I think for me, I always maintain qualifying for the Champions League next year. It would be my goal. We're not going to win it. So let's enjoy it. Let's make the most of it. But it's back to business this weekend, and we've got a tough game down at the London Stadium. We're carrying a few injuries, and that's always going to be the difficulty for Eddie Howe, trying to manage his squad, juggle those players around. And like I say, the international break probably comes at a good time for us, just in terms of getting some of those key players back, or maybe, nursing some of those players who have been carrying little knocks and niggles for the last couple of weeks, getting them back to full fitness, and really sort of going full steam ahead as we head towards Christmas and, of course, that congested fixture schedule.
Yes, we'll get on to all the injury news in just a second, but as always, just going to go quickly through the comments because people are very keen for this Game Week 8. Slavcho, he's looking forward to seeing us. He said it's Friday, it's B and J, but he's warned that if you get those two letters a bit too close together, it might be censored. The disabled team says good afternoon. As always, great to see you. Marius also says hello everyone, but also welcome to the Fun with Flags episode 2. There is a lot to talk about and we're going to get into it. Also, Mark says afternoon. Cedric says hi. CH does as well. Samir, we got a lot of people going on here, and it's nice to see some of the familiar names and also some new names as well too. But we're going to get into the injury news, and just as I always say, we're going to go through everything alphabetically, just like it is over on the Premier Injuries website. So if Ben doesn't answer a few things, you can always head there and look at the team news and just use the click down, so it's very intuitive, easy to use. But yeah, let's go to the predicted lineups and the team news, and as always, starting off with AFC Bournemouth. What is the latest for the Cherries, Ben?
Yeah, in terms of squad availability and players, it's pretty much as you were for the Cherries. A couple of updates with regards to those players on the sidelines. We expect the majority to return potentially after the break, but Tyler Adams, he may need to go under the knife again. Suffered a setback, that recent hamstring problem. Arrived from Leeds on loan, hadn't played any competitive football since March. Had a little bit of a run out in the EFL Cup for the Cherries, none in the Premier League so far, but didn't feel comfortable. Like I say, the club are meeting with specialists at the moment to determine the next steps. Sorry, not Taylor, he's not on loan. He's not on loan. They signed him. I tell you who is on loan, though. Luis Sinisterra from Leeds. He's a potential first Premier League start. He's the only actual change that made from that heavy defeat to Arsenal. Of course, it could go one or two ways. Andoni could make wholesale changes, or he could keep the faith with the majority of those players and just make one or two tweaks. And I think Sinisterra is one of those. He's been building his fitness since his arrival from Leeds on loan. Should be there or thereabouts. Andoni referenced him as a game changer, and that's what he needs at this moment in time. So that's why I have Sinisterra in that starting 11.
We'll continue over to Arsenal, and a lot of eyes on this one. You've gone with a predicted 11 that does not include Bukayo Saka. Do you want to talk us through your thoughts and feelings on this, Ben?
Yeah, look, this is very much a 50-50 call at this moment in time. Mikel Arteta was asked on several separate times during a press conference about the fitness of Bukayo Saka. His response was he's in contention. When pressed, he said, "I'm not a doctor. I've been told he's in contention." We have heard these, a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of mind games from Mikel Arteta in the past. What we do know from just purely from the mechanism, which was said to be a muscle injury caused by that back heel. Now, inherently, that will have some kind of hamstring involvement. And suffice to say, he wasn't able to continue on Tuesday night against London, which was a big Champions League game. So we can't just dismiss that as being some kind of minor little issue, more of a precautionary. So there's definitely something in there. And with this initial lineup, I was certainly playing the percentages in the fact that, like I say, we're talking about a hamstring issue here. I think is it a risk? I mean, we've seen Bukayo Saka in recent games. He's picked up several knocks. Indeed, he went into that game on the back of an injury that he picked up down at the Vitality. So we know he plays a lot of minutes. He has a high load. There's got to be an occasion where Mikel Arteta does take him out the firing line to reset and refresh and pick those goals a little bit more carefully. On the positive side, he has been included in the England squad, and Gareth Southgate does expect him to feature. To what extent, again, we don't know. So I'm really in a bit of a quandary with regards to Saka at this moment. If, like I say, I may leave this one until later. It'll all be done before the deadline, but there's a possibility that I could throw Saka back in there. If it wasn't the fact that it was Manchester City in this top of the table clash, then I'll be more inclined to put Saka maybe on the bench. But because it's this big game, that's what's muddying the waters a little bit.
Yeah, it's really difficult to choose this one as an Arsenal fan as well, because Saka is the star boy. There's so much that goes around him. He's one of those players, like we've discussed many, many times. Probably him and Ødegaard are two, along with maybe Saliba, of those players that is going to start week in, week out if they're fit and ready. And with the likes of Saka, you roll the dice because that game is so important. It's just interesting as well that, there is quite a bit of squad depth, I guess, as well with Arsenal as well. You've gone with Trossard, Jesus and Ketty up there. But do you not think that Reece Nelson might be sniffing around as well if he's not in? Or do you think that those performances of late recently with Trossard, Jesus and Nketiah working quite well means that's the formula that Arteta would go for?
Yeah, I certainly see those as the preferred options with Nelson. And again, you kind of forget that he is a good player, but I think he's just a little bit down that pecking order. And the fact that Champions League game was on Tuesday night, and Arsenal don't obviously play again until Sunday. So in terms of rest and recovery and recuperation, there's no issue there with regards to load. So there's plenty of opportunity there for Mikel Arteta to work with these players. Had those fixtures been a little bit more congested, then maybe you would have seen a little bit more rotation. But all of that came into me thinking, and that's what I'm looking at. The only question mark for me is the Saka. Does he or does he not?
Yeah. And I guess one final thing is, Raya made a bit of a mistake midweek in the Champions League, allowing, Arsenal to be beaten in terms of that game against Lens. Do you think his position's under threat at all, or is he going to continue?
Listen, it's a very, it's been a very contentious discussion point around the Ramsdale sort of Raya situation. And I certainly don't think that Mikel Arteta would have made that choice very lightly. So the fact that maybe there was an error, which is always going to happen, and unfortunately, when you're a goalkeeper, those are exacerbated because inherently, if you do make a mistake, it tends to score, and it was a very high-profile game. But the manager's made that decision. I think he's going to stick with him, through the good and the bad, certainly over the short term, because I think he sees him as his number one, unfortunately, for Aaron Ramsdale.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to continue over Arsenal, over to Aston Villa, who were absolutely amazing last game week. Can they keep up this game week, Ben? They had that Thursday night match, all important for the squad. A few of their players, Watkins did come on a little bit later in the match. But do you think that the team is pretty fit and ready for the weekend?
I mean, it should be. Unai Emery probably took a little bit of a gamble, maybe too much of a gamble, some would say, on Thursday night. Only made 4 changes for that Europa Conference League tie. Thankfully, it looks as if all of those players come through unscathed, and Villa won, so it was a win-win situation. I'm reverting back to the 11 that started against Brighton, at 6-1 demolition. So I am taking a little bit of a punt on Boubacar Kamara and Moussa Diaby. After last weekend's game, Unai Emery said that the issue with Moussa Diaby wasn't serious. He was expected to miss out in Europe, but he didn't expect it to impact him in the Premier League. And those 2 players are due to rejoin the group on Saturday. They will train fully for the first time with the group tomorrow. So again, providing that they come through that without any kind of reaction, then I fully expect them to start, and that's why we went with this 11.
So going over from Aston Villa to Brentford, now this is one that you've tipped as one to watch this weekend as a differential. Manchester United at home, Old Trafford. For some reason, again, I agree with you, Ben. Why are they tipped to win this match? Manchester United have been appalling. Brentford, they've been a little bit better in terms of play style, in terms of goals and things like that. I just don't understand why Man United are tipped as favourites in this match here. So is the injury news positive for Brentford as well?
I mean, generally speaking, there's no change in that Brentford camp. They are missing some key players. We know Ivan Toney, he's suspended until the early part of 2024. Ben Mee is also a big absence in the heart of that defence. But we've seen Christoph Ajer come in, and also, as it is here, Zanka Jorgensen. So again, it's a move away from that 4-4-3. The 4-3-3, as we often see against those so-called maybe lesser teams. And then when we come up against those bigger sides, especially away from home, we see Thomas Frank deploy that 3-5-2 or 5-3-2 when defending, and it's Jorgensen who have went on the left-hand side to occupy that space that maybe Ben Mee would typically sit in, and that's as opposed to maybe Christoph Ajer. Christoph Ajer did get the nod over Roerslev last week, but it's Roerslev maybe in that more I think he'd be more comfortable in that current setup for this week. So that's why we went with that, with Wissa and Bueno leading the Bees front line.
Yes, indeed. And just with that, what do you think the scoreline is going to be? Do you think Brentford can keep a clean sheet at Old Trafford?
I mean, clean sheets are hard to come by, haven't they, for both teams? And certainly, if I was a betting man, the value most definitely lies with the away team. The fact that bookmakers, odds compilers, I keep on looking at Manchester United and making them favourites for the home win. Beggars belief, given what kind of performances that we've seen. And even those victories, the Wolves one springs to mind, and the Nottingham Forest was at 3-2. Both of those extremely lucky on the balance of play. Didn't deserve to take 3 points in either. Those Wolves denied a late penalty. Confidence is fragile. They lost at home in the Champions League to Galatasaray. Could this be a 3rd defeat in a week for the Red Devils?
Could be indeed. And then how long before Ten Hag is out the door? At least conversations about that. Who knows? Brighton up next. And like you said, pretty embarrassed last weekend by the Villains. But is there going to be, a kind of jig of the team? Is there going to be new players brought in to combat what was, I guess, a embarrassing performance for an otherwise usually brilliant Seagulls?
Yeah, I mean, on the balance of play, look, you look at the scoreline and it looks like they've got a good old 1,000, and they did. But in terms of the data and the metrics, there wasn't a lot between the teams. I think even in terms of possession, Brighton actually dominated that game. But Villa had one of those days and they were clinical in front of goal. Ollie Watkins was on fire, and everything that they touched went in, and Brighton made a couple of mistakes and they were punished for that. There will be changes. We've seen lots of changes from Roberto De Zerbi in recent weeks, anything from 4s to 5s to 6s. So it makes a starting 11 a little bit of a minefield. I'm sort of judging this starting 11 on what we've seen happen in Marseille on Thursday night, and also some of those problems which may be enforced. And I'm thinking at left back with Purvis Estupiñán, who's picked up a hamstring problem. Looks like it could be out for around about a month. Now, that left-hand side, we have two main candidates to offer cover, one being Tariq Lamptey, who was great in France on Thursday, and the other one being Igor Chulio. Now, Roberto De Zerbi said it would always be one or the other. I'm based on the fact that Lamptey played 90 minutes on Thursday night in Marseille. Hasn't had a great deal of game time this year. I think it's only maybe his second or his third 90-minute performance in 2023. So that's why we have Igor Chulio at left back. Pascal Gross returned Thursday, but again, muscle problem, quick turnaround. I don't think he's quite at it, but don't shoot me if he does start. It's just a consideration and a thought. And Ivan Ferguson up front with Danny Welbeck sitting in behind, but you could have the likes of maybe Solly Marchant if you wanted to bring in Buonanotte into that Seagull starting 11.
Now, because of some of the issues that you've explained there, and also what happened last weekend, do you expect this to be a high-scoring game between Brighton and Liverpool?
I think it'll be a very entertaining game. Obviously, we see the return of Alexi Lalas against his former club. So, there'll be a little bit of a point to prove there. Liverpool will be smart enough to that VAR, that controversial VAR decision or miscommunication, however you want to describe it. So, look, there's a lot of different narratives to this game. Brighton looking to get back on track. Liverpool were in a fairly decent vein of form until that loss to Tottenham. So I can see both teams going out and trying to win this one. And yeah, we might see an entertaining game. I can see both teams scoring for certain, and maybe a 3-1 or even a 3-2 either way.
Yeah, I think as an Arsenal fan, that game last week with Tottenham really annoyed me. They're riding their luck. We'll get onto that maybe a little bit later. Brian Morrissey has said, who was the midfielder that you said for Liverpool?
The midfielder. Who did I say for Liverpool?
He's put Alexi Lalas.
No, Alexi McAllister.
Yeah.
Did I? Didn't say Lalas, did I? Did I?
You did.
Did I say Lalas?
Yes.
Well, look. At least I pronounced it correctly.
That's the Spanish pronunciation right there.
I mean, it's been a few years since Alexi Lalas donned his boots in the Premier League. Kudos to you for even knowing who he was.
There you go. Classic Ben we have there. Burnley, again, one of those teams, a lot of people say next in the comments. What is the latest there, although we can rush through?
Next.
Right. On to Chelsea then.
Yeah, look, positive update from Mauricio Pochettino. We only have 7 players actually listed in the Chelsea treatment room as it currently stands, which when you've had 12, 13 players sidelined, that's a big boost for them. The main talking point is who's going to lead this Chelsea attack. Armando Broja started at Craven Cottage, grabbed himself a goal in his first start since reconstructive surgery. That was his ACL. Nicholas Jackson returned to the matchday squad after serving a one-match ban. So, like I say, there's a little bit of a consideration there. Now, Pochettino, with a wry smile, said that the decision's already been made. We're not going to tell you. You'll find out on Saturday. Following that performance and the result at Kieran Cottage, I've got my words. You know what it is? I'm on a slippery slope as it currently stands here. I think the Blues will be unchanged. Mudryk has passed a test back in training after being replaced at halftime because of a thigh problem. And also Moses Caicedo, he took a heavy knock to the thigh, a dead leg, but he's trained as normal, so he's fine.
Ah, well, there you go. You got the words out in the end. One of those situations, and I guess for me personally, I think Brozier being back in the team is a big plus. Just looking at his underlying data, he always, overperforms XG or matches it. He's a quality finisher, and maybe with the fact that Chelsea have been underperforming XG since the start of the season, Jackson probably, maybe long term, is the backup to Brozier. That would probably make more sense in terms of their qualities. So let's continue into the next team, which is Crystal Palace. And they...
sorry, Jay. What I was going to say, I would just add that Reece James is training fully and normally. However, because of that one-match suspension he received for insulting a match official after that game at Aston Villa, he must sit this one out.
Oh, okay. So even have they calculated that he was available, so now he's banned in that sense?
In terms of whether... if you receive an FA suspension or a ban in this case, they don't take into consideration whether you're injured or not. So,
fair enough.
Yeah, but in theory, I think he would have probably returned to the matchday squad. He's been working normally, so hopefully that hamstring can hold up, and we'll see him after the international break.
So now we can head over to the Eagles, Crystal Palace. Difficult game against Nottingham Forest, but they are at home. But is the injury news positive for them?
It isn't. Certainly not for owners of Eberechi Eze. Roy Hodgson describes it as a serious injury. Now, we've had one scan on that hamstring. Doesn't look great. The club are waiting for a second one to try and make a more definitive diagnosis. But I think initial assessments indicate that we're looking at something that may be around that 5 to 6 week mark. So you're talking maybe, that grade 2 type of tear. Now, with those hamstring problems, we know that there are no guarantees with that. Michael Elise, case in point, we've had several setbacks, and it looks as if the French international is no nearer to a return. So who will come in and how the Eagles will set up? Again, it's a little bit of a tricky one to call. I do have Jaro Riedeveld, who will come into that midfield in a like-for-like swap. I also have Jean-Philippe Mateta leading the Eagles' attack, but it could be Odsonne-Edouard. There was no mention during the open section of the broadcast this afternoon, but we do know that he missed out as a precautionary measure last weekend, and he has been back on the training pitches this week.
So it's mixed news there for old Crystal Palace, but maybe some Palace fans will have enjoyed that Wilfried Zaha scored against Manchester United in the Champions League. And so that makes it, I guess, a kind of good fixture a little bit for old Nottingham Forest when they travel down to Selhurst Park. But we're going to switch over to Everton now. They are playing Bournemouth this weekend. But is there positive news there? I mean, one of the problems is they had another high XG game last weekend, but they just can't score. They just, they can't put these chances away, can they, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin's returning to the matchday squad has been a big boost. I think that's 3-3 now for the Toffee striker. And the more minutes he gets under his belt, that the better he will become. And, he'll be seen as that player who could potentially keep Everton in the Premier League. Beto, he has a good start since arriving in the summer, but he will take a little bit of time to acclimatise to the rigours of the league. And at some point, we may see a 4-4-2 setup from Sean Dyche. That was his favoured formation back at Burnley, but he does have a few more players at his disposal at Everton, and that's why he said he's got a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we set things up. But for now, I still think it's a little bit too soon to go for that. Other discussion points would be around the fullback positions, and namely, the Ashley Young and the Michaelenko. Does Patterson come in? Possibly. If he did, does Young miss out, or would Young switch to the left flank? I'm going with more or less the same team as last week, because, like you say, generally they're creating chances, they're just not taking them. So there's, that's the silver lining on the defeat. If they were to click, then you see Everton maybe pulling away from that relegation zone.
Yes. Now, a couple of people have said next because they don't have any interest in Everton, and you've explained many reasons why there. But Samir R has said he's swapping Visa from Brentford for Calvert-Lewin this week. Do you think that's a brave decision, Ben? Because we've discussed many times that Calvert-Lewin is still kind of finding his feet, but is he kind of guaranteed?
Listen, I didn't expect Dominic Calvert-Lewin to start last week. I think ideal scenario, maybe. I think he had started on the midweek, so starting back-to-back was maybe a little bit of a calculated risk, but he came through that, and I think that maybe just shows his importance to the team and how much he's valued at Everton, and particularly by Sean Dyche. So for me, if he's anywhere near 75 to 80% match fit, then Dominic Calvert-Lewin starts. And he's showed in the past, particularly under Carlo Ancelotti, we showed how much of a valued asset he can be. So that was one of the questions I was going to put out this week. How long before Dominic Calvert-Lewin becomes a serious fantasy consideration? And look, I mean, like you say, you can't negate the fact that 3-3, and an Everton team that has been struggling. They're creating opportunities. Their XG last week, 3.65, was the highest in the Premier League. Why not take a punt?
I mean, the problem is I guess Everton's form, but also their fixture schedule. There's not like a really good point in the season where you go slip them in. It's kind of a tough one, but he is quality. This is the thing with Calvert-Lewin. Even though Everton lost that game against Luton, he's still got a goal. He is performing well, so it's a very tough decision to make. So moving on from Everton, and we get to Fulham, another team that not a lot of interest, but any updates there?
Just two players that are brought in, and as much as I do like Raul Jimenez, you have to question why Marco Silva persists in sticking with the Mexican. It may be 30 games now that he hasn't scored. Carlos Vinicius may not be the answer long term, but he has shown in glimpses in recent matches he has been able to score. So, if you want to change things and you need results, I think he's got to throw Vinicius in there. And also, I think it's time for Alex Iwobi, who's impressed from the bench, done well in the AFL Cup, but in the needs a Premier League start. And I think he comes in for I think it was Harry Wilson on the right hand side.
There you go. So moving on from Fulham to Liverpool, the Reds did quite well in the Europa League. They got a good couple of goals in there and saw the fixture out pretty easily, which is good. Salah came off early. A few of their key assets were carefully managed. So yeah, what is it with Liverpool that people need to be aware of, if anything?
Yeah, well, normally the considerations are in attack, but because of the injury to Cody Gakpo and suspension for Diogo Jota, the front three more or less picks itself this week. We know Curtis Jones, Liverpool failed in their attempt to overturn the red card that he received at Tottenham. I think Ryan Gravenberch, he's been fantastic in his 3 starts. I think he's the first player in 21 years to have 3 goal involvements in his first 3 games. Scored a goal last night that he said was probably the best of his career. Believe he will get his opportunity this weekend. Joel Matip over Konate. The right back slot, maybe Joe Gomez will feel a little bit maybe unfortunate at losing his place, but I think Trent He's one of the best attacking. Can you call him a fullback? What is he? He's one of the best hybrid wing backs, inside backs, or in the world. I think he comes back and starts for Liverpool.
Yes, and Gravenberch, he's looked good. He's an exciting player, and I think Klopp will get the best out of him. It's kind of sad that he didn't do well at Bayern Munich, but Liverpool can get the best out of a really, really kind of high quality player there. I guess as well, if the team continues as it is, do you think Luis Diaz is now another player that people need to be aware of and maybe for their teams locked in? Or is he going to be part of that rotation once Gakpo and Jota are back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Luis Diaz. I think he's a quality player and very unlucky not to add to his goal tally last weekend. Incorrectly ruled out for offside. But that front three for Liverpool, outside of Mo Salah, how many times we mentioned it before? We pick our players on those ones that we feel are maybe guaranteed those minutes and are going to be playing 60 to 70 plus minutes. You're just not getting that with that Liverpool forward. So that's the gamble and that's a consideration.
Yes, there's a high ceiling there with Diaz, but also high risk that he doesn't play. And that's the kind of way that you and I play. Luton, another team that we can kind of, I guess, skip. Not much interest in them. So Manchester City are up next. There'll be a lot of interest to see who makes the team for this huge, I guess, is it too early to say title deciding clash between Arsenal?
There's a long way to go in the season. I think it'll be a good game. I think you guys will probably put up a decent fight, but I expect Manchester City to bounce back after last weekend's shock defeat at Molineux. Wolves, they looked really off it. 2 defeats in a row. They had, they lost to Newcastle prior to that. And I think a normal service will resume. There were changes at RB Leipzig. They still went across to the German side, who were being in decent nick themselves, got a fantastic result. Akanji is one of those players that we've left out. This is a team that I could potentially tweak before the FPL deadline. Like I say, it's always difficult with Manchester City because they've got so much strength and depth within that squad.
Hello, everybody.
Ruben Diaz has played a lot of minutes in recent times. He's one that you could maybe look at to bring up. Rico Lewis, I think was Pep said that he's one of the best players to train in his whole sort of 14 to 15 year managerial career. And when you consider some of the players that he's worked with, then there's no higher honour to have bestowed on you. He did mention or reference the fact that Rico Lewis hasn't played many games, he says, but that will change and he will get a lot of game time now. If Rico Lewis was to come in, then maybe we could see a ditching of this 4-2-3-1 that I've went with. And he has sort of preferred that 3-2-4-1 that we've seen on occasions last season and has been fairly successful. So again, I'll have a little bit of a think on that. And if maybe Rico Lewis, if I'm leaning towards him, then maybe I'll go lean towards that. Like I say, that 3-2-4-1 formation with him sitting in that holding role.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for Arsenal to play Man City at the moment. The loss of Rodri, no De Bruyne in there as well. It could be maybe a rare chance for us to get a victory, but I don't count on it. The way that we played at the moment is not great. We're so defensively poor at home as well. Just, we concede such sloppy goals. And the fact that, we conceded 2 to a pretty bad Tottenham side, you're going against one of the best attacks in the world there. They'll punish the mistakes that we make far more. Samir says that I need to get a coffee down me. I don't know if I'm looking particularly tired today. I'm quite tired, to be fair. I guess burning the candle at both ends. I guess I don't know if people heard a loud noise at some point during that. I was trying to find the latest on Jack Grealish. What is the news on him? And I guess is he going to be back anytime soon?
Jack Grealish, unless we're talking about something which has happened that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Then, Jack Grealish should be absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's just not in the starting 11 is my
All
question.
right, yeah, all right, okay. Working his way back to full fitness. That was quite a serious thigh problem that he had, and of course, you look at how City had been performing up until that Wolves game. Then it's difficult for him to sort of break in. But just building that fitness, uh, you know, should be in and around. Like I say, it wouldn't surprise you if Pep threw him in from the start at the weekend, but when you look at the likes of Phil Foden, I think Julian Alvarez has got to start. And then Doku, I think he was sub midweek in the Champions League. So, again, he's another one that I would expect to be in from the off, which again means that Jack Grealish would probably have to settle for a place on the bench.
Mark has said, his opinion here that Pep's unimpressed by Grealish's summer antics. So maybe a summer of excess might have caught up with him. But Diego Martinez Rios has asked, after Pep said about Stones, when do you think he will be back to the squad?
But, he did return to the squad midweek, albeit as an unused substitute. So he is training with the group. He is building fitness, but he hasn't had any competitive minutes at all since the Community Shield. So that's back was right at the beginning of August. So, we're looking at a couple of months down the line. So he is playing a little bit of catch up. In terms of his Manchester City, Pep said that, he's not ready for Manchester City, but possibly, over the internationals, he could be. So, that's an indication that he's on the right track, maybe towards the end of October. Then maybe be pushing to be included in that starting 11.
So moving from the blue side of Manchester to the red side, like we said a little bit earlier, inexplicably they are, the favourites to win against Brentford with this very crazy back line as well. It's really makeshift. I've not mentioned that word that I always do when it comes to these scenarios, but maybe in terms of the club, would you say the club is in crisis?
I would say that the club is managing issues both on and off the field, Jason, is what I would say.
I'm going to have to start calling you a politician, given all these politicians' answers, mate. But yeah, what is the latest of the club's management of these on and off field positions then, as you kind of described it?
Yeah, look, I think this is probably on reflection of starting 11 that I will look to change. Eric Ten Hag said that Anthony Dos Santos, of course, returned to training last Saturday and was involved in the Champions League. He said he is ready to start. And again, I think Eric Ten Hag may feel inclined to roll the dice given results in recent matches. Like you say, we're coming off the back of 2 defeats, and is it 4 defeats in 7 matches? The worst start in the league for around about 34 years, if I've got that right off the top of my head. So look, things aren't great, and I just think maybe Anthony comes in on that right hand side. That would push Bruno into the middle with Mason Mount dropping out. I'm also starting Scott McTominay in there, and look, he's not the prettiest, on the eye. And I compare him very much to the likes of Sean Longstaff at Newcastle. He's a player that goes about his work, gets through a hell of a lot of graft, and allows those better players, those more creative playmakers, to do their job. And I just think maybe Manchester United are missing that bite, those legs in midfield. And I think for me, I think McTominay needs to come back into that team. And I also have Harry Maguire starting alongside Varane again to maybe just try and tighten up that side defensively. Although, if it isn't, then it's going to be Lindelof coming in.
Brian has said it's not me here, Ben. Crisis klaxon. So there you go. It's from the comments there. Marius is baffled that Maguire is starting. I know I am rolling the dice, and I'm looking at those results, and I'm thinking, what is the manager? What's his consideration? We've got to change something. We're losing games. We're leaking goals. What can I do with the personnel that I have available within my squad? And Harry Maguire is one of those players that
potentially he can call upon. So that's me thinking behind that. Look, it's a 50-50 call, isn't it, with Victor Lindelof anyway? So it's one or the other. I'm not.
We've got a message here from Mark. He said the Glazers actually melted down that Klaxon for scrap value. There's excitement over Højlund, which again, we've discussed this before. Until Man United start playing well, I don't see him getting too many goal involvements. And Samir has said, is Maddison/Son worth a -4 for Rashford? If you're bringing them in, then absolutely. I'd be getting Rashford out ASAP. Let's have a look, though. Up next, as always, I say the best United team in the Premier League. It's Newcastle. Now, after that midweek game, what kind of team news is there? Do you think there's going to be many changes?
This is a tough one. It really, really is. I struggled. Look, we'll stick with the back four, as we always do. Lascelles for Sven Botman, who we know is out with a knee problem, hopefully back after the international break. Lascelles, I mean, who's Kylian Mbappe? Lascelles was, unbelievable on the night. Fantastic. I mean, the whole team were. Elliot Anderson back for Tonali. I think that's a like for like. Bruno Guimaraes, we know he's been managing an ongoing ankle problem, but he's going to start. I've talked about the virtues of Sean Longstaff. It's the front three which really I'm scratching my head at, to be honest. I do have Callum Wilson starting. Hasn't been included in the England squad because of that hamstring problem. Missed out midweek. And Eddie Howe even said, there are no guarantees. He's one of the closest to those potential returners. But we'll have to see. I'm hoping the fact that we did see him on the training pitches at the beginning of the week is a good indication that, he's very, very close. So that's why I have Callum Wilson starting. And if that's the case, that will then allow the opportunity to put Isak out on that left-hand side. Harvey Barnes injured, Anthony Gordon serving a one-match ban. So really that left-hand side, Joe Linton, who's been deployed there as well, is also considered a serious doubt because of a hamstring problem. So without Wilson, we're really struggling on that left-hand side. And really, I'm thinking, does Eddie Howe then maybe change his formation slightly? I'm keeping fingers crossed. If Super Cal is fit and he starts, then everything's good.
Hope it's supercalifragilistic. Oh God, I can't say the word. Supercalifragilistic There you go. With the Wilson situation, do you think that the dice might be rolled because it's such an important game? West Ham are one of those teams that might be vying for a European position, but also is it the fact that it's the international after that, so he'll have a bit of time to rest?
No, I don't think Eddie Howe will take any chances at all if there are concerns, because even though there is an international break, which means we have a fortnight to recover, if he was to suffer, a tear in that muscle because he's being pushed too hard, then we're easily looking at a 4 to 6 weeks out, and that would be a big blow. So, like I say, if there are concerns, keep him out of one match, and then when we reconvene for game week 9, we know we're going to have a fully fit and firing Callum Wilson. So I don't, like I say, there's no need or any point in taking any chances. We'll get through that game with West Ham. From a fantasy perspective, if you are a Callum Wilson owner, he has a fantastic record against West Ham. Loves a goal against the Hammers. So keep your fingers crossed. And if he starts, I guarantee he will score.
There you go. That's a big claim right there. Nottingham Forest up next. What is the latest there?
We surprised to see Morgan Gibbs-White drop down to the bench last time out, and that was because of there was a start there for Nicolas Dominguez, the Argentinian, was coming in for his second game. Not a great deal. Look, I hold my hands up. I don't really know a lot about Dominguez, but he pilled up a little bit of a muscle problem himself, and that's question mark on his availability, and that opens the door for Gibbs-White. Not a great deal of changes. The left back spot potentially up for grabs. We have to follow in there. He had surgery in the summer on his groin, on a hernia. So that sort of kept him on the fringes of that first team. But with Ola Aina suffering his own muscle issue, that kept him out last week, and also injuries to Tavares on the opposite flank. Then, Forest have their own crisis at fullback.
Samir asked, where are these predicted lineups that we're going through? So just to be clear, you can head over to the Fantasy Football Hub. This is where Ben puts up his legendary lineups there. So it's not on the Premier Injuries website. That's just kind of injury information. And also you can kind of easily find a live stream on there. It's above the injury table. But as always, we say, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you're up to date with all the videos that we put out, but also follow Ben's Twitter, follow the Premier Injuries Twitter. You can follow mine as well, although I do a mixture of things. I also talk about the stuff that I do with politics, so don't be disappointed if you go on there and I'm talking about something to do with the government or Labour. Let's continue though with the analysis here, going from Nottingham Forest to Sheffield United, although I think again Sheffield United probably not a lot of interest in that, so we'll skip to Tottenham. Actually, before we go, Morgan Gibbs-White is starting, is the question from Marius. Are you sure that he'll be starting?
I was surprised that he didn't start last time out. I think he's been fantastic since he arrived. There are question marks maybe over the fee that Nottingham Forest paid Wolves for when he arrived, but he's starting to pay that back in bucket loads. So for me, yeah, he absolutely comes in, and like I say, it looks a like-for-like swap with Dominguez with that hamstring issue. I don't think Steve Cooper will risk him from the start. So that front three or front four with a Womney, that's a really attacking front line, very exciting, very quick, and it promises goals. So I think alongside Hudson-Odoi and Gibson-White, they've got some real sort of talent on their hands.
Tottenham are up next, and obviously this is one of the most enticing games of the weekend. It's against Luton. Full disclosure, I have Heung-min Son as my captain this game week. I think it's just too good of a fixture to pass up. But Ben, what is your kind of latest update for Spurs?
Yeah, obviously lots of questions with regards to the fitness of Heung-min Son and also James Maddison. Son's been managing an ongoing groin issue, which spilled over from last season and had a little bit of a tidy up in the summer as well. That's niggling away, but in terms of his outputs, he's still delivering. Yes, his training load is being managed, and yes, he is maybe not playing as many minutes as typically we're used to seeing for Heung-min Son, but it doesn't appear to be hampering him in terms of his returns too much. He's fine. Also, James Maddison took part in every session this week, hasn't missed one, so no concerns or any lingering doubts over that knee injury that put him into question for game week 7. Otherwise, it's pretty much as you were. Richarlison starting. Mana Solomon may not play again this year, and by this year I mean 2023, not the season. That was a training ground injury. Looks to be damaged his meniscus. We're waiting to understand the full extent of that, but probably or highly likely that he's going to need surgery. Most do. It's whether he has some kind of partial tidy up a mesenectomy, or he actually has that stitched. Either will have enough impact on his timeline, anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 weeks to potentially maybe 3 to even 4 months.
Goodness me. Well, we'll keep you up to date on that, and hopefully for him as well that he comes back as soon as possible, because it's terrible having one of those serious injuries. A lot of people are very happy that you put Son through the middle, not Richarlison. So kind of keeping up, I guess, the good chemistry that they built up that way. And Mohammed has said that he agrees with me for Son to be captain this game week. But Jandre has said he's going with Salah as captain. As always, get involved with the comments with your captaincy choices, and if you've got any kind of worries over them as well, you can ask a question. But we're getting to the end now, so do get in those final questions. West Ham up next. what is the latest with the Hammers?
Yeah, I'm expecting the Hammers to be more or less pretty much as you were. The big question mark remains over Mikel Antonio. That was an adductor problem picked up last week. It's kept him out of the squad in Europe on Thursday night, and hasn't trained with the squad yet. So again, another one that will go down to the wire. He could potentially rejoin the group on Saturday, and David Moyes will make a decision after that final session. Now, if he was to miss out, it looks as if Mohamed Kudus, is it Kudus? I think it is the player that will likely lead that West Ham attack. He seems to have pushed Danny Ings down the pecking order. And again, we've talked about Danny Ings on many occasions. From the outside looking in, he looks like a great prospect, a great buy, a clinical finisher who can bring a lot of goals to clubs. But wherever he seems to go in recent seasons, he has those little purple patches when he first gets there, and then he disappears and he drops off the radar. And he's a player who hasn't had many minutes at all this season. I'm working off the top of my head. I think we're looking at around about 30, 32, 34 minutes in the Premier League, which is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, that's the only concern that we're aware of at this moment. But David Moyes did speak first thing on Friday morning, barely 12 hours after the final whistle in Europe. So players were still being evaluated.
There you go. We got a lot of people correcting the way that you said Mohamed Kudus.
Oh, that's what I said. That's exactly what I said.
I think that's how they're saying pronounce it. Whatever they say, you pronounce it that way.
I'm a man of the people.
Yes.
When the people speak, I listen.
Exactly.
Kudus. Mohamed Kudus.
Finally, Wolves. What is the latest for them?
Yeah, we've seen a slight tweak in formation from Gary O'Neill last week. Of course, they were playing the champions Manchester City, and they pulled off that shock result. It meant that they brought in Totti into that back line again for a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2 or even a 5-4-1, depending on different phases throughout the game. Because of that result, how do you change a team that goes out and beats Manchester City? I just couldn't do it, in all honesty. So that's why we've left things as they were. They're not exactly. It counts for nothing if Wolves cannot go and back that performance up. But what a shot in the arm it was, getting 3 points against, like I say, a team that was coming off the back of 6 straight wins. So that was a fantastic result. And like I say, based on that premise, I think all 11 players deserve to start this weekend.
So we've got a few final questions here. Mark wanted to know what my politics is that I do. I won't share my politics here because obviously that divides people. I do a lot of political analysis. I interview MPs, and then I'm also doing a PhD in politics as well. And then in terms of it, we've got a final question for me and for you, Ben. Ben, are you betting your house on Diaby starting?
The difficulty is we've got one session to go.
Okay.
And even if he was to train and come through that session, there's nothing to say that he wouldn't pick up anything else. If we were talking about a player that doesn't suffer any kind of reaction, any kind of further complications from last weekend's injury, I'm saying yes, Diaby starts this weekend.
There you go. And number 2 question for me, Giandre said, all dressed up, are you going out, Jason? I just have mad, crazy good drip, is all I'm going to say. Anyway, going to love you and leave you all. Have a fantastic week. Have a fantastic game week. And we will see you again very, very soon. And the best of luck to all of you and the best of health, as we always say.